My name is Joyce. I was 19 years old when my whole life came undone. I used to believe I was one of the lucky ones, raised in a complete family, as my mother often boasted to her church friends and the neighbors on our pristine suburban street near Sacramento, California. My parents, Gregory and Sharon, ran a tight ship. My older sister, Savannah, was already climbing her way into law school, and our family photo albums were filled with piano recitals, honor roll certificates, and stiff smiles in coordinated church outfits. But behind that glossy surface, love was conditional: do what we say, be who we want, and everything will be fine. That unspoken rule cracked open one spring morning. And once it did, the collapse was fast and cruel. It started with a video. A private video Dylan took of me during spring break, when I was foolish enough to believe that love and trust were the same thing. I had already broken up with him months before, after I found out he was cheating. I thought that chapter was over. I thought I had left him in the past. But Dylan had other plans. The first message came at 6:42 a.m., from a classmate I barely knew. "Joyce, are you okay?" By 7:05 a.m., my phone buzzed nonstop. Texts, DMs, snide emojis, screenshots. Whispers turned into wildfire. I opened my laptop. And I swear, I stopped breathing for a full minute. There I was. Frozen in motion. Intimate. Exposed. Laughter in the background. Someone had layered music over the video. It was vile. Cruel. The betrayal hit like a sledgehammer, but that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was what happened when I got home. I didn't know my sister Savannah had seen the video first. I didn't know she'd forwarded it to my father with a single sentence that still chills me. "You need to act before she ruins our family's reputation." That afternoon, the front door wouldn't open. The lock had been changed. One of my old bags, frayed at the seams, the zipper barely hanging on, sat on the front porch like some kind of exiled offering. I knocked. Then pounded. Then screamed. My mother peeked through the curtain. Her face was blank. Cold. Not a flicker of recognition. Not a single question, "Are you okay?" Not even anger. Just absence. Then my father's voice came from inside. Low. Final. "You brought this shame on yourself, Joyce. We didn't raise a daughter to be a punchline." I wanted to scream that I had been violated, used, betrayed. That I was the victim. But I knew, deep down, they didn't care. To them, reputation mattered more than truth. Image over integrity. I sat on the porch steps, watching the sun go down. Inside that tattered bag were a few clothes, an old journal, and a pair of worn-out sneakers. That night, I circled around to the backyard, climbed through the same window I used to sneak out of as a kid. The room was untouched but lifeless. Like they'd already erased me. I sat on the floor and opened my journal, hands trembling. I began to write. "I'm sorry for disappointing everyone. I don't know how to fix this. I just hope." I stopped. I stared at the page. What the hell was I apologizing for? With trembling fingers, I tore the page out and lit it on fire with my lighter. The flame curled the edges of the paper until it crumbled into ash on the floor. I crawled back out the window and walked away. No phone. No plan. Just me and that bag. I slept in a friend's car that night. He let me stay 2 more days, then told me his girlfriend felt uncomfortable. I didn't blame him. I had nowhere to go. On the 4th day, I boarded an interstate bus. I didn't even check the destination. The only thing I knew for sure was that I needed to get as far away from Sacramento, and my family, as possible. The bus rolled through the night, its windows fogged from breath and frost. I leaned my head against the cold glass, my body still trembling from exhaustion, humiliation, and something worse, shame that didn't belong to me, but clung to me like a second skin. We reached Denver just before dawn. The sky was steel gray. My coat, too thin for winter, did nothing against the wind slicing down the street outside the station. I had $28 left, enough for a few meals or maybe one night at a sketchy motel, but I knew better than to waste it. I wandered for hours, looking for somewhere I could sit unnoticed. Eventually, I found a concrete overpass a few blocks from the bus station. I curled beneath it, using my bag as a pillow, and pulled my thin blanket tighter around me. Sleep didn't come. Only memories did. I was nobody now. Just another girl in a big city with no name, no home, no one. Until I heard the soft sound of crying. It was nearly midnight, and the streetlights flickered weakly overhead. I lifted my head and saw a little girl, maybe 7, maybe younger, standing alone in the shadows, clutching a teddy bear with one missing eye. She was shaking. Crying. Mute with fear. I approached slowly. "Hey, it's okay. I'm not gonna hurt you. Where's your mom?" She didn't speak. Just stared at me with wide eyes. I knelt down and held out my hand. "I'll help you find her. I promise." To my shock, she nodded. We walked for blocks, checking alleyways and storefronts, asking anyone we passed. Eventually, a young woman came sprinting down the sidewalk, her voice hoarse and cracking, "Elena." The moment she saw her daughter, she dropped to her knees, crying harder than the girl. I stayed back. Watched the reunion. And then turned to walk away. But before I could, the mother caught my wrist. "Thank you. Thank you for finding her." I didn't have the strength to speak. I just nodded. That night, something changed. It wasn't big or obvious. Just a flicker of warmth deep in my frozen chest. I wasn't useless. I wasn't broken. I had helped someone. And that meant I still mattered, maybe just a little. The next morning, I took scissors to my hair in the bathroom of a gas station. The long curls that once framed my face fell to the stained tile like memories I didn't want anymore. I looked in the mirror and saw someone new. Not Joyce of Sacramento. Not the shameful daughter. Just me. Joyce R. I kept the R as a reminder, not of my family, but of what I had survived. I started walking. Eventually, I found a dingy little diner off Colfax Avenue with a handwritten sign taped to the window, "Help Wanted." I stepped inside, voice hoarse. "I'll wash dishes. Clean floors. Anything." The owner, a heavy-set woman named Carla, gave me a long look. "We pay cash. No benefits." "You sure?" I nodded. The work was hard. Plates piled sky-high, grease under my nails, back aching by the end of every shift. But I showed up every day, early and eager. I took double shifts when I could. I pocketed tips, bought second-hand clothes, and found a room to rent in a crumbling building that smelled like mold and stale cigarettes. At night, I took on a second job, cleaning a small health clinic nearby. The pay was terrible. The hours were worse. But I needed every dollar. Every single one. I stopped counting days. Weeks passed. Then months. One afternoon, while wiping down a waiting room bench at the clinic, I found a forgotten paperback wedged between the cushions. It was a book on immigration law. I almost tossed it, but something made me keep it. That night, I opened it and didn't put it down until morning. It was dense and confusing, full of terms I didn't understand. But it awakened something in me. The law had once been used as a weapon against me. But what if I could learn to use it as a shield for someone else? The next week, I walked into the community center and signed up for every free workshop I could find. Digital literacy. GED tutoring. A basic legal seminar. I had no time. No background. No connections. But I had purpose. And that made all the difference. One snowy evening, I was leaving the clinic when I heard shouting. A woman was pleading in broken English as two men in plain clothes waved paperwork in her face, threatening to take her son. My heart slammed against my ribs. I stepped in. "Excuse me," I said, voice steady. "This paper? It's not valid. She doesn't have to sign anything." The men sneered. "Who are you, her lawyer?" "No," I said. "But I know enough to recognize a fake voluntary deportation consent form when I see one." Their eyes narrowed, but they backed off. The mother clutched her son, tears streaming down her face. "Gracias. Gracias." 3 days later, a man in a gray coat showed up at the clinic. He introduced himself as Marcus Ellis, director of a non-profit called Liberty Bridge. "We heard what you did. We could use someone like you. No law degree needed. Just heart." He handed me a business card. My hand shook as I took it. For the first time in a long time, I saw a door crack open. I stepped through. Liberty Bridge wasn't a towering office building with polished floors and a buzzing front desk. It was a narrow, drafty two-story on the edge of downtown Denver, sandwiched between a laundromat and a taqueria. The carpets were worn, the walls were lined with metal file cabinets, and the conference room doubled as a supply closet. But to me, it was sacred ground. I started at the very bottom. Making coffee. Copying forms. Walking case files to the courthouse. Marcus didn't promise anything glamorous, but he offered something no one else ever had to trust. "You've got a good head, Joyce," he said during my first week. "Don't be afraid to ask questions. No one here expects you to know everything. Just care enough to try." So I tried. During the day, I sorted documents and watched how the paralegals handled intake interviews. At night, I pulled up lectures on immigration law from public university websites. I scribbled notes in margins, cross-checked definitions, and learned to recognize patterns in policy. By the second month, I was helping families fill out asylum forms and prepping legal packets for emergency visa renewals. I still cleaned the clinic in the evenings and waited tables on weekends, but every spare moment I poured into Liberty Bridge. Each time a family was granted a stay of removal, or a child received DACA protection, it felt like a small piece of the universe had tilted back toward justice. And in helping them, I was healing myself. One afternoon, as I delivered case folders to Marcus's office, he looked up and said, "There's a workshop at the Jefferson Community Center next week. One of ours was supposed to speak, but she's out sick. Want to take her place?" My heart thudded. "Speak? Me? You've been helping prepare the material. It's your work. Own it." I was terrified, but I went. I stood in front of 20 people, hands shaking, voice uneven, explaining how to apply for a hardship waiver. I stumbled at first, forgot what I was saying mid-sentence, but I didn't stop. And by the end, when an older man said, "Thank you, Mija. No one's ever explained it that way before," I knew I had found my voice again. I started teaching more workshops. Slowly, word spread. People began referring to me not just as a helper, but as someone who understood, because I did. I wasn't speaking from behind a polished desk. I had lived on those streets. Slept under that bridge. I wasn't separate from them, I was them. 6 months in, I got my first paycheck that didn't bounce between overdraft fees. I paid off the back rent I owed my landlord. I bought a proper winter coat. It felt like a miracle. Then came the article. A small Denver newspaper wrote a piece on Liberty Bridge's outreach work. A reporter asked to profile one of our younger volunteers. Marcus suggested me. I hesitated. I still carried the fear of being found. Of being dragged through the digital mud again. But Marcus said, "We won't print your full name. Just Joyce, our community advocate." So I said yes. The article painted me in light I never imagined I'd be worthy of. It didn't mention my past, just my present. My work. My impact. But it was enough. Requests began pouring in, from schools, churches, shelters. Could Joyce come speak? Could she help prepare materials? Could she help us understand what was happening to our neighbors, our friends, our communities? And I did. Quietly, diligently. I refused TV interviews, turned down radio spots. I wasn't ready to be seen, not fully. But I was ready to lead. A year passed. Then 2. By the 3rd, I was appointed as an official immigration policy advisor for the city of Denver. I had a desk with my name on it. I had a badge. I had a voice in rooms where laws were shaped. At first, I didn't believe it. But the proof was in the people who showed up to thank me, the families who invited me to their birthdays, who sent photos of their children graduating. I wasn't famous. I didn't want to be. But I had made myself undeniable. I remember one winter morning, snow still clinging to the curbs, when my phone rang. A colleague breathlessly told me that ICE had moved to deport a Honduran family despite an ongoing appeal. I dropped everything. Rushed to the community shelter. A 9-year-old girl stood clutching a teddy bear, her face pale with fear. When I told her she and her family were safe, for now, she threw her arms around me and whispered, "You're our hero." It was the first time I cried in months. Not from pain. But from purpose. Not long after, Marcus and I met for coffee. He leaned across the table, smile tugging at his lips. "Joyce, it's time." "For what?" "You should run for office." I laughed. "I clean clinics, Marcus." I wasn't even allowed to eat dinner at my parents' table after they disowned me. "And you want me to, what? Run for state office?" He didn't flinch. "You don't need a family name or money. You've got something better." Proof. I didn't answer him then. But I didn't forget it either. That night, I sat on my tiny couch with a single lamp flickering behind me. I pulled out my old journal, now thick with clippings and notes and dried tears. I flipped to a blank page and wrote 3 words. I am ready. When I filed my candidacy for governor of Colorado, I did it quietly, without a press conference, without a flashy announcement video. Just a paper filed. A promise made. I didn't even use my full name on the initial filing. Just, Joyce R. I expected nothing. Maybe a few polite nods. Maybe some laughter behind closed doors. But something strange happened. People started listening. I wasn't the polished type. I didn't wear designer suits or speak in perfect, rehearsed sound bites. But I showed up. I went to town halls, churches, fire stations, halfway homes. I shook hands with janitors, veterans, teachers, farmers, people who felt forgotten, just like I once was. I told them the truth. I told them I wasn't a politician. That I had once been cast out by my own family. Slept under bridges. Scrubbed floors. That I had seen what it meant to have nothing. But more importantly, I had learned how to build something from it. People didn't just believe me. They related to me. My platform was simple: transparency, community investment, and legal protection for the voiceless. While other candidates ran on corporate endorsements, I ran on gratitude, on the backs of mothers I had helped, young immigrants I'd guided, and workers I'd stood beside. My campaign posters were plain. White background. Bold letters. Let action speak louder than words. The donations were small, $10, $20, $50, but they poured in. From every corner of the state. People who didn't care about my last name but cared about what I'd lived through. The more my name appeared in local papers, the more the whispers began. Wasn't that the same Joyce from Sacramento? The scandal girl? The exile? And then, on a quiet Tuesday, I got the message I never expected. A blurry screenshot sent by my campaign manager. The video. That video. Resurfaced. There it was, years old, but unmistakable. Someone had dug it up and posted it anonymously, likely hoping to derail my campaign. The timing wasn't a coincidence. Panic swept through the office. Staff scrambled. "We can get it scrubbed," one said. "We'll sue," said another. My phone buzzed with messages from reporters asking for comment. My chest clenched. Not from fear. From memory. But this time, I wasn't 19 and locked out of my home. I was a candidate. I had a voice. And I had something better, I had nothing to hide. So I stepped out. We didn't call a press conference. I walked right up to the Denver courthouse steps with Marcus beside me and 24 community members, people I had helped, people who had helped me. And I spoke. "That video," I said into the microphones, "is real. I was betrayed by someone I trusted. My privacy was violated. And when I needed my family the most, they turned their backs on me. I don't want your pity," I continued. "I want you to know that survival is possible." I didn't become a victim of that video, I became a voice for people who've suffered in silence. The next day, the video didn't trend. My speech did. Thousands shared it online. Survivors of abuse, revenge porn, family betrayal. People who said, "She's speaking for me." Support surged. And then I won. Joyce, once left to sleep under bridges and clean floors for change, was elected governor of Colorado. The celebration wasn't grand. I held my inauguration at the Jefferson Community Center, the same place I taught my first workshop. The same folding chairs. The same peeling linoleum floor. My speech was short. I'm not here because I'm perfect. I'm here because I survived. I'm here because I listened. And I'm here to make sure no one is ever erased the way I once was. But the past wasn't done with me yet. 3 months into office, headlines broke. Savannah R., Texas state prosecutor, under investigation for evidence tampering. My sister. The same sister who had forwarded that video to our father with a single line, "You need to act before she ruins our family's reputation." The media called it Texas's political earthquake. Whistleblowers said Savannah had suppressed evidence in multiple deportation cases, jeopardizing the lives of vulnerable families. One of those families? A single Honduran mother. The same woman I had once protected from coercion. I watched the news in silence. I felt no vengeance. No triumph. Only irony. Savannah was facing the very storm I once fled. 3 days later, I attended her preliminary hearing in Austin. Not as a politician. Not as a sister. Just as a witness. I wore a gray coat. Sat quietly in the back. But the moment the judge scanned the courtroom, she paused. Squinted. And asked, "Is that Governor Joyce R.?" The courtroom went still. Cameras turned. My parents, sitting in the front row, turned around in shock. My father's mouth opened slightly, stunned. My mother clutched a rosary. Savannah turned too, eyes wide, face pale. I didn't wave. I didn't nod. I simply looked back at them, calm. Whole. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't the girl they abandoned. I was the woman they could no longer ignore. I left the courtroom before the hearing ended. Not out of fear or shame, but because I didn't need to stay. I hadn't come to gloat. I didn't need to see Savannah handcuffed or hear lawyers argue over her intent. I had already witnessed what I came for, the silent reckoning on my family's faces. That night, back in my Denver office, I stared at my phone. Dozens of missed calls. 2 voicemails from reporters. 1 from my communications team. And 1 text from my father. Are you using the family to polish your image? That's enough. I stared at it for a long moment before typing back. I've carried this name longer than the time you ever stood up for me. If you don't feel ashamed, I have no reason left to carry your shame either. Then I blocked the number. An hour later, my assistant knocked. Governor, there's something you should see. She turned on the office TV. A tabloid blog had dug up the old video again, this time with dramatic music and distorted filters. They paired it with images of Savannah in court, framing it as sisterly vengeance. They tried to make it seem like I had orchestrated her downfall out of revenge. They couldn't have been more wrong. I told my team not to issue a statement. Let them look, I said. I'm not afraid anymore. And I meant it. That night, I stood alone at my apartment window. The Denver skyline shimmered with streetlights and snowflakes. My reflection on the glass didn't show the broken girl anymore. Just a woman, quiet, unshaken, finally whole. 2 days later, a new message arrived. From my mother. Joyce, please come home for dinner. We need to talk. She ended it with, please. The word landed heavier than I expected. A minute later, another text came from my father. You owe the family a conversation. Come. I stared at those messages. 10 years. 10 years of silence, banishment, erasure. And now, when their golden daughter stood accused, they turned to the daughter they once discarded. I didn't reply. But I did go. I arrived that Friday evening, unannounced, pulling into the same driveway where my childhood ended. The house looked the same. White picket fence. Porch swing. Rose bushes in bloom. But it all felt smaller now, like a stage set built to hold a lie. My mother opened the door. She looked older. Her shoulders hunched, her eyes tired. Joyce, she whispered. You're home. I didn't smile. I stepped inside. My father stood in the foyer, arms crossed like he was bracing for battle. Savannah sat at the dining table, thinner, paler than I'd ever seen her. Her hands twisted in her lap like they were searching for something to hold on to. Dinner was already set. Porcelain plates. Crystal glasses. A roast on the table. Everything pristine. But no one ate. They didn't invite me to sit. I did so anyway. The silence was suffocating until my father broke it. You know why we asked you here. I said nothing. He continued, Savannah made a mistake, but she's still your sister. We were hoping, maybe you could say something to the prosecution. Use your position. Help her get a fair chance. My mother reached across the table, tears in her eyes. Sweetheart, please. You're the family's only hope now. Savannah finally looked up. I know I don't deserve anything, she said, voice hoarse. But I have no one else. I placed my fork down. The clink echoed like a bell in the heavy silence. Then I asked. If I weren't Governor Joyce R., would you still see me as family? The silence was so loud it rang in my ears. No one answered. So I stood. I looked at the painting on the wall, one I had made when I was 16. A landscape of a Texas field under a blazing sunset. The corner where I had signed my name was covered with a patch of fabric, stitched in so neatly no one would ever guess something had been hidden. That said it all. I turned back to them and said clearly. I kept the R so I would never forget where I came from. But I didn't need you to become who I am. My mother broke down into sobs. Joyce, please. Don't leave us now. But I was already walking toward the door. I stepped out into the warm Texas night, the grass freshly cut, the air thick with memories I no longer feared. I got into the car, shut the door, and pulled away. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. What lay ahead was bigger than anything I left behind. Back in Denver, I called an emergency meeting with my legislative team. We're going to draft 2 bills, I said, my voice firm. One to protect people who speak out, even against their families. And one to allow public servants to disclose family ties that might compromise their duties. Someone asked, what will we call them? I didn't hesitate. The Justice Witness Protection Bill. And the Public Kinship Act. They nodded. And so, in the sleepless weeks that followed, I began writing the laws I wished had existed when I was 19. Not just for me, but for everyone who had been punished for telling the truth. The weeks that followed blurred into a rhythm of exhaustion and determination. My desk at the state capitol was buried beneath draft proposals, handwritten notes, letters from survivors, and highlighted reports. I didn't sleep much. I didn't care. This wasn't just policy, it was personal. It was war. Not against my family, but against the system that told people like me that silence was the price of belonging. We finalized the bills. The Justice Witness Protection Bill made it a criminal offense to coerce, slander, or intimidate someone using familial ties as leverage, especially if they were whistleblowers or victims of abuse. The Public Kinship Act allowed anyone in public service, law enforcement, education, or government to formally report familial connections that might lead to conflicts of interest, without fear of retribution or public shame. It wasn't about destroying families. It was about defending integrity. We held the press conference in a modest room at the Colorado State Capitol, no grand banners, no fancy lighting. Just me, a podium, and 2 folders. I used to think my story was unique, I told the gathered reporters. That I was the only one who had been silenced by the people who claimed to love me. But I was wrong. This is not just my story. It's the story of thousands. A reporter raised a hand. Governor, are you turning a personal issue into politics? I didn't flinch. No. I'm turning injustice into legislation. The press conference went viral. News outlets across the country picked it up. Governor Joyce strikes back at family betrayal with groundbreaking legislation. Some cheered. Others scoffed. Social media exploded. Hashtags like #FamilyIsNotAnAlibi, #JoyceR, and #SilentNoMore trended for days. But something else happened too. Letters poured in. Emails. Phone calls. People from across the country began telling their stories, teachers punished for reporting abusive parents, police officers pressured to protect relatives from prosecution, young women silenced by their families after speaking out against predators. One letter came in a yellowed envelope, handwritten and careful. Governor Joyce. My name is Harold Bennett. I opposed you during your campaign. I believed you were dangerous. I thought you were against family values. But then your bill protected my daughter when she tried to report her abusive ex-husband, and my church tried to silence her. I was wrong about you. Thank you for doing what men like me were too afraid to do. I cried when I read that letter. Not loud tears. Just the kind that slip out quietly, gently. The kind that cleanse you from the inside out. The day of the vote came. I wore a plain navy suit, no makeup, no stylist. I wanted to feel like the girl who once stood on a cold street in Denver, holding a tattered bag and wondering if she'd survive the week. The legislative chamber buzzed with tension as the first bill was called. Senate Bill 482, Justice Witness Protection Bill. A pause. Then the roll call. Yes. 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 Abstain. Yes. One by one, the votes came in. It passed. Cheers broke out in the chamber. We moved to the next. Senate Bill 483, Public Kinship Act. It passed too. I didn't smile. Not at first. I just stood there, feeling the weight of a decade finally shift off my shoulders. Like a backpack I didn't know I'd been carrying had suddenly vanished. That evening, I stayed late at the Capitol. My staff left hours earlier. I sat alone at my desk, rereading the final draft of the Justice Witness Protection Bill. The ink was barely dry. Then came a knock at the door. My assistant peeked in. "Governor, someone's here." "Do they have an appointment?" She hesitated. "No. But, it's your sister." My breath caught. I looked up. My heart didn't race. My palms didn't sweat. I just nodded. "Let her in." Savannah stepped in slowly. She didn't wear a suit. Just a worn gray sweater and jeans. Her face was pale, makeup-free. She looked like someone who hadn't slept in weeks. "Joyce," she said quietly. "I don't know where to start." "You don't have to." "No," she insisted, taking a shaky breath. "I used to envy you. Your freedom. Your honesty. And when that video surfaced, I saw a chance to get rid of you." She looked down, voice trembling. "I told myself I was protecting the family. But I was protecting myself. I didn't want to be compared to you anymore. And now, I've lost everything." Tears fell down her face. "I'm not asking you to save me. I just needed to say it. I'm sorry." I leaned back in my chair. There was a time when I would have given anything to hear those words. But now? Now I didn't need them. "You didn't destroy me, Savannah," I said softly. "You erased me. And when someone's forgotten long enough, they learn to remember themselves." She nodded silently, wiping her eyes. "I hope you do the same," I added. She stood slowly. "Goodbye, Joyce." And then she left. No embrace. No fanfare. Just closure. The kind you don't expect, but welcome when it comes. A week after Savannah left my office, I attended a small community gathering in South Denver. No cameras, no press, no political handlers. Just a folded table, some metal chairs, and 40 or so neighbors talking about housing rights and after-school programs. I wore jeans and a light blue shirt. No title tag. Just Joyce. I helped set up water jugs, passed out plates of cookies, and sat beside a grandmother who asked me if I'd ever considered becoming a teacher. I laughed. I guess in a way, I already am. When the event ended and people trickled out, I lingered to help stack chairs. That's when I noticed him, standing quietly at the back of the room, holding an old hat in both hands. My father. Gregory. He looked smaller somehow. The confident gait and pressed collar were gone. He wore a faded shirt, a look of quiet discomfort on his face. For a moment, we just stared at each other. Then he took a hesitant step forward. "I didn't understand you before," he said, his voice lower than I remembered. "I thought you were a rebellious daughter trying to embarrass us. But today, seeing you speak to them, seeing how they look at you." He swallowed. "You've done what I never had the courage to do." I said nothing. There were no dramatic hugs. No begging. No gasping apologies. Just truth. After a moment, I answered softly, "I just did what I believed was right." He nodded. Looked at me like he was seeing me for the first time. Then turned and walked away. And that was enough. That night, it rained. A soft, cold drizzle. As I stepped outside, I let it soak through my hair, my shirt, my sleeves. Years ago, I would have run for shelter, hidden under the eaves. Not now. Now, I tilted my face up to the sky and let it fall on me freely. Because the truth is, I didn't just survive. I evolved. I didn't seek revenge. I didn't return to my family for approval or applause. I didn't rise to prove them wrong. I rose to prove myself right. To honor that broken girl who once stared at a flickering screen and thought her life was over. To fight for the women silenced in kitchens, the daughters disowned over shame, the victims told to keep quiet to protect reputations. And now? I was no longer governor because I had escaped my past. I was governor because I had built something better from it. In the months that followed, both the Justice Witness Protection Bill and the Public Kinship Act were signed into law. Other states began drafting similar legislation. Advocacy groups named me among the top voices for ethical reform in family law. But none of those accolades meant as much as the letter I received from a teenage girl in rural Texas. Dear Governor Joyce, my family kicked me out when I told the truth about what my uncle did. I was going to give up. But then I saw your story. I printed out your speech. I carry it in my backpack. I want to be like you one day. I cried again. Not from pain, but from power. That girl would never know how much her words meant to me. Because in her strength, I saw my own. This journey was never about redemption. It was about liberation. And now, every law I pass, every community I protect, every family I save, it's for that girl. And the girl I used to be. So if you're listening to this, if someone once made you feel like a stain, a problem, a mistake, I want you to remember this. You don't need to be welcomed back to be worthy. You don't need an apology to move forward. You don't need their forgiveness to thrive. What you need is to choose yourself. And when you do, you become unstoppable. Thank you for watching Revenge Echoes, where stories speak louder than revenge. What you just heard might sound like fiction, but for someone out there, it's the truth they never got to tell. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more powerful stories of justice, courage, and resilience. What would you have done in Joyce's shoes? Tell us in the comments. Your voice matters.